Suicide Awareness and Prevention, provided by the Lexington Group Incorporated, providing employee assistance and organizational development services nationwide. Why are we so afraid to talk about suicide? Talking about the feelings surrounding suicide promotes understanding and can greatly reduce the immediate distress of a suicidal person. It's okay to ask. This can come as a great relief to see that someone else has some insight into how they feel. Suicide has traditionally been a taboo topic in Western society, which has led to further alienation and only made the problem worse. We can go a long way to reducing our suicide rate by accepting people as they are, removing the social taboo on talking about feeling suicidal, and telling people that it's okay to feel bad. A person talking about how they feel greatly reduces their distress. They also begin to see other options and are much less likely to attempt suicide. Suicide statistics in America. Did you know that suicide is the 11th leading cause of death in the United States? There are 1.3% of total deaths in the United States that are caused by suicide. It is known that more men than women die by suicide, with a 4-to-1 ratio. 73% of all suicide deaths are white males, and 80% of all suicide deaths caused by firearms are also white males. There are an estimated 8 to 25 attempted suicides for each suicide death. The attempted ratio is higher in women and youth. The suicide rate among children ages 10 to 14 is 1.3, equivalent to 100,000, and the suicide rate among adolescents ages 15 to 19 is 7.9, equivalent to 1 million. Myths about suicide. Anyone who tries to kill themselves has got to be crazy. Perhaps 10% of all suicidal people are psychotic or have delusional beliefs about reality. Most suicidal people suffer from a recognized mental illness or depression, but many depressed people adequately manage their daily affairs. The absence of craziness does not mean the absence of a suicide risk. More myths about suicide. Those problems weren't enough to commit suicide over. This is often said by people who knew a person who committed suicide. You cannot assume that because you feel something is not worth being suicidal about, that the person you are with feels the same way. It is not how bad the problem is, but how badly it's hurting the person who has it. Myths about suicide continued. Doesn't talking about suicide encourage it? No. Don't be afraid to talk about any suicidal feelings. Studies have found that more than 75% of all completed suicides did things in the few weeks or months prior to their deaths to indicate to others that they were in deep despair. Anyone expressing suicidal feelings needs immediate attention. If you or someone you know are experiencing suicidal feelings, talk to someone you trust and seek professional help immediately. Prevention exercise. What about me? Am I at risk? It's quite likely that some people who read this will one day attempt suicide. Here's a quick suicidal prevention exercise. Think of a list of 5 people you might talk to if you had no one else to turn to, starting with the most preferred person at the top of the list. Form a no suicide contract with yourself, promising that if you ever feel suicidal, you will go to each of the people on the list and simply tell them how you feel. And that if someone didn't listen, you would keep going until you found someone who would. Many suicidal attempters are so distressed that they can't see anywhere to turn to in the midst of a crisis, so having a thought beforehand of several people to approach would be helpful. Why do people attempt suicide? People usually attempt suicide to block unbearable emotional pain, which is caused by a wide variety of problems. It is often a cry for help. A person attempting suicide is often so distressed that they are unable to see that they have other options. Because of their distress, they may not think of anyone they can turn to, furthering this isolation. Does suicide affect family and friends? How does suicide affect family and friends? Suicide is often extremely traumatic for the friends and family members that remain, the survivors, even though people that attempt suicide often think that no one cares about them. In addition to the feelings of grief normally associated with a person's death, there may be guilt, anger, resentment, remorse, confusion, and great distress over unresolved issues. Watch for the following warning signs associated with suicide risk. Conditions associated with suicide risk. How can you tell if someone you know may be at risk for committing suicide? There are some warning signs you should be aware of. The following are some conditions associated with increased risk of suicide. Death or terminal illness of a relative or friend, divorce, separation, or a broken relationship, stress on the family, loss of health, real or imaginary, loss of job or home and money problems including loss of status and low self-esteem, alcohol or drug abuse, and depression. Emotional and behavioral changes are also warning signs associated with suicide, including overwhelming pain, hopelessness, powerlessness, and feelings of worthlessness. Personality changes, when you notice the person becomes sad, withdrawn, tired, apathetic, anxious, irritable, or prone to angry outbursts. Declining performance in school, work, or other activities, social isolation, declining interest in sex, friends, or activities previously enjoyed. Warnings of potential suicidal behavior include previous suicide attempts or mini attempts, explicit statements of suicidal thoughts or feelings, development of a suicidal plan, acquiring the means, rehearsal behavior, and setting a time for the attempt. Any self-inflicted injuries such as cuts and burns, reckless behavior, making out a will or giving away favorite possessions, and inappropriately saying goodbye to friends and family. Steps to determine threat. Listen, ask, and refer. Listen. Give the person every opportunity to unburden their troubles and ventilate their feelings. You don't need to say much, and there are no magic words. If you are concerned, your voice and manner will show it. Give them relief from being alone with their pain. Let them know you are glad they turned to you. Patience, sympathy, acceptance. Avoid arguments and advice giving. Ask. Are you feeling suicidal? If you ask a despairing person this question, you are doing a good thing for them. You are showing them that you care, that you take them seriously, and that you are willing to let them share their pain with you. You are giving them further opportunity to discharge pent-up and painful feelings. If the person is having thoughts of suicide, find out how far along their ideation has progressed. Ask them, do you have a plan? Refer. If the person is acutely suicidal, do not leave them alone. Bring them to the emergency room. Call the police department and call the EAP. Make sure their home is safe. Referring. Urge professional help. Urge the person to seek professional help. Persistence and patience may be needed to seek, engage, and continue with as many options as possible. In any referral situation, let the person know that you care and want to help them. Confidentiality. It is the part of the person that is afraid of more pain that says, don't tell anyone. It is the part of the person that wants to stay alive that tells you about it. You can get outside help and still protect the persons from the pain of a breach of confidence. Call the Employee Assistance Program. Do not try to go it alone. Get help for the person and for yourself. Distributing the anxieties and responsibilities of suicide prevention makes it easier and much more effective. From crisis to recovery. Most people have suicidal thoughts or feelings at some point in their lives, yet less than 2% of all deaths are suicides. Nearly all suicidal people suffer from conditions that will pass with time or with assistance of a recovery program. Access to EAP. Call us at the toll-free number 1-800-676-HELP or 4357. We are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The service is confidential, voluntary, and an unlimited access.